Hello and welcome to Focus on Liberia. Welcome another edition. This time a brand new program here at Focus on Liberia. The program you are watching is called Focus on Liberia, and this program is being simulcast on Prime FN 105.5 in Liberia. If you are just joining in, we want to say welcome. We have a very high profile panel, comfortably seated to discuss a very, very important topic. We know all that is going on right now in Liberia. The topic for today, state-owned enterprises role in today's Liberia. We all have followed the news and heard about the shortage of rice. We heard about the challenges of providing stable electricity in Liberia, and so many things we heard about. At some point back, we heard about gas shortage in Liberia. Most of these things are provided by state-owned enterprises. So what are state-owned enterprises? What are their responsibility? How independent are they? The panel will be able to help us to look deeper into these issues and see what kind of solution can also be suggested so that these things can be able to do the things for which they were established in the first place. Seated and ready to roll is Mr. Larry Kennedy. Larry, welcome to Focus on Liberia.
Thanks for the invitation, Anthony. So glad to be here, man. And welcome to my fellow panelists, and good day to my fellow panelists as well.
We also have Mr. William Kim from the Focus on Liberia Marketplace, where Larry is also from, by the way. William, welcome to Focus on Liberia.
Thank you, Anthony, and to all listeners and viewers, I say thank you and welcome. Get ready, sit back. We got a good show today, and look forward to the discussion and imparting some knowledge. Thank you.
Also, from Focus on Liberia Marketplace is Mr. Depu Zuo. He is an economist. Mr. Zuo, welcome to Focus on Liberia. You are muted, sir. You are muted. Okay, good.
Thank you so much, Anthony. I'm so happy to be here tonight, and good evening to our people back in Liberia.
All right. Making the panel also is Mr. Alex Coffey. He also from FOL Marketplace. He have had this opportunity of working at RIA before, and he's here, and we are very, very sure he will be so helpful in the discussion. Mr. Coffey, welcome. Nemeju, fuede.
Okay. Yeah, this is Alex Coffey. Thank you, Anthony, and hello to my fellow panelists, and hello to all the people in Sabah land who are listening, and all our people in Liberia who are listening as well. Thank you for having me.
All right, folks, you heard from our panel there. They are all ready. And again, we can welcome you enough and also ask you to do us that favor of sharing the broadcast so as many people as possible can be able to follow the discussions. The issues are serious that are happening at these various state-owned enterprises, so we want to go into the issues without wasting time. Gentlemen, let us get started here quickly. State-owned enterprises. Let me start with you, Alex. What are state-owned enterprises, and why were they established in the first place? Let's know, what the institutions are. Some people see them, but they may not actually know.
So, thank you for that question. So, that would help us to provide basis for the conversation, and I will try to make it as simple as possible. I know Larry will come in with all the Wall Street definition and things like that, but let me make it simple. So if you form a company, any company for that matter, right? Mm-hmm. You go and register the company. The company is either owned by one person or is owned by a group of people. All right. Mm-hmm. So it can be a bank like Echo Bank or West Fargo Bank. It can be an enterprise in business where you buy and sell, or you can produce items. So then it so you register that company. It can be a non-profit, it can be a health agency, any company you register, right? Then you take the next level. So the company is either owned by private people or owned by many people. So that company is a public company. So you can trade the company, right, on the public, on the stock exchange or something like that. So it becomes, so many people have ownership in that company, right? Now, when you come on the government side, government has certain institutions, the ministries, the other agencies, and things like that. But these, when you say state-owned enterprises, it is an entity that is owned by government, like the way private companies are owned by private people, is owned by the government.
Okay.
What it does is it can make its own money, spends its own money, and then it's supposed to give a return, right? What we call the dividend. When you buy shares in any company, when you own company, you make a profit and you share the profit, right? These companies were not really set up to make profit, but they are supposed to make money, and they give the government some money so that the government can help with its budget and to build schools, to do other things that the government is supposed to do. So you have companies like the National Food Authority in Liberia, right? This is not unique to Liberia. Other countries have a similar situation,
right?
You know, and so you have the Liberia Petroleum Refining Company, the LPRC. You have the Forestry Development Authority. You have the RIA, Rubber International Airport. You have LEC, Liberia Electricity Corporation. You have Water and Sewer. You have LPNC. All these companies were meant to operate. They are owned by the government, right? They're owned by the government. So they're meant to operate on their own autonomously without interference, and then pay their own, they have their own budget, pay their own salaries, pay their own expenses, but they're supposed to leave something from there to support the government. Maybe 500,000 every year, 1 million every year, 5 million every year. They're supposed to give it to the government to help the government. That's what their intention is about.
Thank you. And let me come to you, Larry. Thanks, Alex, for the answer to that question. Is there any difference, Larry, from state-owned enterprises to what they always refer to as line ministry, for example, the Ministry of Education? Is there any difference between statutory ministry and state-owned enterprises like FPRC, for example? Is there any difference?
Yeah, I think the key difference is state-owned enterprises they're like businesses. Lack of a better definition, they are just like businesses, whereas a lot of the ministries are there to provide mainly services, right? The state-owned enterprises are providing services, but they're there also not to lose money, because they're there to make money, take that money, and let that become part of the budget to help support the government. The key difference, another essential difference with the state-owned enterprise is a lot of them are established because private entities usually don't have the capital to get set up in these enterprises. For example, starting like an electric grid is something that a private entity will find extremely difficult in Liberia to get started. The state, on the other hand, will have the resources to do it. Something like the sewer grid, the water and sewer. So those entities are usually established initially by the government, but then later on down the line, in a lot of developed countries, they get transitioned or sold to private entities, because over a period of time, they just become completely inefficient, and which is what we're seeing today in Liberia.
Thank you. And Mr. Zuo, let's talk about the independence, if there is, for these state-owned enterprises. From the setup of the institutions, were they established to be independent? If yes, is there a limit to their independence? Does the government have any role to play directly or indirectly in their work? I think you are muted again. I can't hear you.
State-owned enterprises are.
You went mute again.
These entity, I'm sorry, state-owned enterprises are government-owned, as the name suggests, but they are also supposed to function like a private firm. And for that reason, it gives them that independence and not to function like a land management agency. One reason there is that it's supposed to make sure raise capital on its own to invest, either from government side or from private individual or from company to buy shares into their activity. Therefore, they have that independence. But we can also say it's also interdependent on government because they have relationship with government in terms of their operation. So what is very much important there is that they have this independent in terms of being a private firm, but at the same time serving public interest. And that itself gives them the opportunity to see how best they can go out and say efficiency level have to be developed based on the board of directors. That's why they have board of directors to make sure they follow the activities. And the board of directors are some are government officials or private individual or entities that can serve on the board of XOEs. And that itself, I would think that is part of independent they have, but it's not full independent they have. Like, for example, one of the firms that was established to operate solely like a private firm is the LPRC. And that itself was done by President Toba to ensure that the issue of crude oil processing and production will be something that they can put in the front burner with the hope that they will transition to oil processing as a country because Liberia had a potential for oil at the time. So it was actually established as a firm, as an entity to operate like a private firm. And they will be able to declare dividend and government dividend will be given at the same time. So it's something, it's very much important. And all depends on how the leaders and the management see it to make it more independent and functional.
Thank you. Gentlemen, very soon we'll be going into some of these state-owned enterprises to discuss them specifically. But I'm curious here. Let's look at history a little bit. And William, I'm going to start with you. Has there been a time in our nation's life when just any of these state-owned enterprises has been able to provide reliable services to the people of Liberia?
Thank you, Anthony. I think from the advent, we can definitely say yes. There have been times where LPRC, as you know, didn't just come out recently. They've been around for a very, very long time, even during the time of President Doe and prior to President Doe. They have provided service. LEC also has been an entity that at one point in time, they were, I guess you can say, quite reliable. And I go back to my time as a child growing up in Liberia, remembering the reliability of LEC. Yes, granted, it didn't have a far outreach, but the areas where they were in, they worked pretty well. You also looked at from the utility side, that actually went also good from the water and power. Once again, in the areas where they were established, they were kind of moving along. And somewhere along the line, of course, with the war and everything, they became severely impacted. And since then, we've struggled tremendously in Liberia for these entities to run at a very efficient level. One of the areas that we thought had a lot of promise was the petroleum side, but unfortunately, it hasn't panned out that way.
Thank you. And gentlemen, I want the rest of you to chime in on that. One meaning, your memory, history, what you all have lived in Liberia, APRC, Water and Sewer, LEC, Larry, any knowledge of any of these institutions providing reliable services to our people, and how satisfactory was that, years back?
Yeah, I think even up to a little after the coup d'etat, 1979, a little bit after that, there was pretty decent electricity in Liberia. I mean, okay. Periodically you have the whole, light going situation. We did have telephone lines. We know a lot of that infrastructure got destroyed. You can go to your faucet, turn on the tap. And of course, I'm speaking in terms of within the city. I know the rural areas were treated completely differently. So just speaking pretty much within the city and the immediate outlying rural areas. There was electricity. It was reliable up to a certain extent. Water and sewer, reliable up to a certain extent. The state-owned enterprise, like the maritime, was in fact bringing in some revenue, right, up to a certain extent. So the reliability was there, but of course, it's kind of hard. It's difficult to compare how the organizations were pretty much run during that time as opposed to now, because the infrastructure had been decimated. When you have a situation where the infrastructure has been completely decimated, this is the time when you need some really good technocrats, people who have hands-on experience in those specific areas, to come on board to see how to turn this thing around. It's like any company out there, during the here in the States, during the financial crisis, a lot of companies had some very difficult issues. GM, a lot of these companies had to get bailed out. But whenever you had those situations, what did those companies do? They brought in some very good CEOs to help turn those companies around. So I think that, we had the reliability back then. We know the infrastructure was decimated. The problem is, rather than bring in people who had hands-on experience doing this stuff, like in the case of like the maritime, people who have experience with maritime or the National Port Authority, that's not what we have. We're having a situation now where, and you asked the question earlier. So I'm getting some feedback. You asked a question earlier in terms of being influenced. One of the major issues with state-owned enterprises is external influence from government officials. Something mentioned by Ambassador McCarthy as well. Government officials are influencing what's going on at LEC. So yeah, the state-owned enterprises did do their job, prior to the coup d'etat, even a little after that. But then after the war, it's just kind of been hard to get things, restarted.
Thank you. And Mr. Coffey, before I can go to Depo, you had an opportunity to work in Liberia and also work here. Larry talked about the financial crisis. Institution came back, they look at what they were doing and improve on it, and they are even providing much better and efficient services now. So from the history that we are getting from you guys, there was some reliability in the provision of services then. How come we have not been able to improve on that when we have a little history of doing this thing? What is responsible for that, Alex? Give me some meat here.
Yeah, I mean, Larry is right. He's on top of the money when it comes to what he just explained. And even during, for example, during the Doe era, right? Okay. The companies were still doing well, right? Some level of efficiency and things like that. But this whole issue of the state-owned enterprises now becoming cash cows, right? For bad governance and corruption and things like that, and interference. Yes, we know that the president of the country, right? The president of the country is the one that makes the appointment, right? And but those entities are meant to operate autonomously on their own, and there shouldn't be a lot of interference. But over the years, we've seen interference, we've seen corruption, we've seen mismanagement of this institution in the face of natural things happening. So the war happened and we came back. I remember even as a kid, right? Or growing up, everybody wanted to be managing director for NPA or LEC or whatever, because of the issue of corruption. So these companies, these entities swayed away from their core mission. I mean, fast forward today, they're still, for example, the National Port Authority gave some money to the government, 5 million, 6 million, 4 million, every night. LPRC gave some money, annually, like 1 million, 2 million, but it should be more. But because these entities have been mismanaged, like Larry said, the wrong people have been placed, and then the too much interference from the House of Legislature, the executive branch, the interference have, permeated the mismanagement of this entity, and they keep going down and down and down.
Depo, these institutions, historically speaking, will you say they have been up to task, not only the management of them, but also meeting the standards and being the institutions that were established to be? Will you say that or not?
Yes, I definitely agree to that, that indeed they have done well in the past. Besides the LPRC that I mentioned, that was very effective in terms of crude oil processing and distribution across the country. You have the Electricity Corporation. You also have the telecommunication, LTA. And right now, after the Civil War, one of the SOE that was established that became very much productive, but later on there's a decline, is also the telecommunication. Instead of having the LTA doing the regulatory and also doing the operation, they have to set another one called Liberia Telecommunication Authority, and SLE. It has been very effective to make sure that in terms of GSM company, the regulation and frequency and other things, they've been doing very well. They brought in revenue, even though right now there have been some decline in it, have been very effective. And you besides that, you also look at the Port Authority. For some of a certain point in time, they were doing a lot to generate revenue. So what is happening there? I would say I would agree with Larry. The issue of managerial competence is something that we have to look at it very closely. Besides that, it's important that while it's true it's owned by government, one thing that there is that it should be for us, the proposal we made before to government is to have what called performance quota, in the sense that you let the institution come up with a plan to ensure they do investment that will bring in return on the investment government giving, instead of them depending on subsidy. So you will push them to make sure that you give them performance quota. Like that, you expect efficiency level. And then say, look, for now, LPMC is closed down now, got LACRA, which replaced LPMC. These entities are responsible for cocoa product, rubber or agriculture product, commodity. They're responsible for that. How do you really make this space effective to ensure that agriculture opportunity is available to the farmers? What you need to do is tell them to give them a plan, strategic plan, growth path that will be given, that they will be monitored from there, so that the board of directors will be looking at that very carefully. And all in all, you need to know who all serve on the board of SOE as well. These are some of the complications they've been having. In as much as you have managerial competencies, also the policy makers, the board of directors that are being appointed to some of these, the SOEs don't know what they're supposed to do. So that's what I can say. Yes, there have been opportunity of performance even in the past and currently.
Thank you. Then I bring to you the issue of growth. I think this is key. The services they have provided in the past might have been reliable to some extent, LEC, water and sewer, but where is the growth even now? Let's look at, for example, the National Port Authority. Since that particular port was built, I've not seen any expansion, any growth whatsoever. So can we agree or disagree here that they might have done better in the past, even here in some places at some periods, but I have not seen any significant growth? Let me throw another example in there. LPRC, from what I see, has not been able to build an additional facilities to say in a different county. Maybe they have done so, I don't know. So let's look at growth. Have these state-owned enterprises been able to experience growth since they were established? William, you go first.
Anthony, you bring up growth. I think they're still trying to just maintain. Right? I think they're trying to maintain and they're trying to manage. And something that's important, as we have defined state-owned enterprise, is that pretty much from the government side, it's this infusion of capital or resources or enablement to allow that enterprise to then be able to walk on its own later on. But what we have is that our enterprises are being ran like they are a ministry, right? And they have not been able to win off the mother's milk. I guess that's what I should say. Maritime is a very interesting case because we bring in a lot of stuff, we import a lot of stuff, but yet we've outsourced that almost the entire management of the port, including the maintenance, including operating it, including any outlook in terms of improvement. We've pretty much outsourced that. And in that area, I can say that it's doing a little bit better than maintaining because of the necessity, such something where the rubber hits the road. But I cannot say the same for the water side. I cannot say the same for the LPRC side. And I cannot say the same for many of the other ones, sadly.
And Larry, let's dive deeper into the aspect of growth, training of the personnel, whether you send them out or in Liberia. Let's look at that growth. Let's look at the facility. Let's look at growth in every aspect. What would you say?
Man, back in the 60s, after the World Bank did a study on Liberia, and they found out one of the major obstacles to why the Liberian economy, although they say, there were instances where, it was growing, but it wasn't really developing. It was because of a lack of capacity. And capacity in terms of the people who were actually running things in Liberia at the time. A clear example of where there's a lack of growth, look at the airport. Since the US government built that airport, have you seen an expansion of the airport, like more runways, more terminals? Have you seen it? No, it's still the same. The reason why, before we even look at the state-owned enterprises growing, we noticed that the economy over the past several years hasn't even been able to grow. We can't even grow the economy, let alone talk about growing the state-owned enterprises. The reason why it's so difficult to grow a lot of these state-owned enterprises, for several reasons. Number one, we have a lot of people who are put in positions either because they are friends of somebody or they're related to somebody, but they lack the competencies to do the job. No country has ever really grown year over year over year without having access to capital. Access to capital means the state-owned enterprise should have the ability to put out some bonds. Let people invest in that bond so you can use the bond to either extend the airport, put in a power grid, or do something else. But if you allow state-owned enterprises to do that stuff, what's going to happen to the money? Look at the National Port Authority. They have their own little side project. It's nonsense. You can't have the Port Authority running side projects. Whatever money they're making, that should go directly to the budget. So the issue of growth is not even going to happen to these state-owned enterprises because the people who are running them, they have, I'm not going to categorize or put everybody in the same category. I'll just say a majority of the people. There are some people there who are doing some decent jobs, I'm sure, and who are committed to getting the work done. But I say on the majority side, there are some people in there who just don't have the ability to grow the entity beyond where they met it. Take a look at the Ministry of Finance website. You look at the Ministry of Finance website, you take a look at the budget they put out there for these state-owned enterprises. A lot of them are coming up in the red. Their expenditures are far more. These are the projections for 2022. They are projecting to come up short in 2022. So despite the 785.6 million budget they're putting out there, all these state enterprises are going to come up short based on their projections. So there's no growth factor into these state-owned enterprises. A lot of people just don't have the concept in terms of what it takes to grow. RIA is a prime example, So yeah, I don't see it growing beyond where it is right now. Not unless someone new comes in and say, look, we need to either privatize this stuff because it's not efficient being run by government. Government are not known to be efficient. They're not known for that stuff. And this is even worse. Yeah.
Mr. Coffee, if the economy is to grow, I'm not the guy who started business at all, but I would think the state enterprises should grow first. Because from my understanding, they were not only created to provide the essential services, but they were more so to generate some revenue that will be able to strengthen the economy and the nation's budget. If that is true, what is stopping that?
Look, those entities. What you said is correct. Those entities were meant. Any entity established, like the ministries and other agencies, they were established to provide a service. That is why they are divided the way they are divided, right?
Yeah.
Ministry of Gender is supposed to take care of gender issues. So Water and Sea was supposed to take care of the water grid. LEC is supposed to take care the RI. So what I keep saying is here that these entities, like Riverset Pro said, you need to first exist before growing. They are barely existing, right? But I would say they are only existing. Yes, I agree with they are only existing. And I will give you an example, right? When the government is serious for governance, when it's serious to uphold the rule of law, when it's serious to fight corruption, everything else will follow. Now, when I serve as a GMAP expert from 2006 to 2009, the reason why, one of the primary, we had the brains and the thing to do it. We met the airport, like most of the institutions, the Freeport, the LPRC, we met them down, but we were able to lift them up. It is when you have the political will and you are giving, like the post there, you are giving a blueprint, say this, or we all put the blueprint together. And the blueprints are proven. This is your performance contract. This is what you're supposed to do, and you are provided the resources, and your activities is not interfered with, except where you are messing things up. Of course, then it will come to bring you to check. So, at the airport and other institutions that I interacted with at that time, we were able to move this institution from the red because one, you had the international community program. It's like what we have the IMF program now. You have the GMAP that the international community were funding, so they had their eyes on it. You had a president at that time for the first 4 years who agreed for this thing to work. So we had the political will. And then we had the managing director, Abraham Simmons, who was a visionary leader, and myself, who lifted the airport from the red to green to blue. So we were able to do all the emergency works, and now we're prepared now to do the bigger work to extend the airport to all that stuff. But then in our 10 year, interference surfaced. Political interference surfaced. Managing director he had to resign because other people felt that he was a man of his own. And then I too, my contract was cut short in the 10 year instead of the 10 year. So we had to leave. Immediately we left, the down spiral started. So when you have, what I want to say is, so all the entities, and it's not just the SOEs, almost all the entities in Liberia, right? When you don't have political will, when you don't hold people accountable to a management contract, to performance contract, and you just put people there because of politics or because of other reasons, and it serves as a problem. That is the main reason why most of the entities are going down spiral instead of expanding or improving. That's why the airport, for example, has not expanded.
Thank you. And Depo, I don't know, I'll be using some words that I'm not sure of yet. Growth metrics. The airline that I work for, at the beginning of every year, he sends out to everybody his plan, his goal. These are the things the airline will achieve this year. We'll open this amount of routes, we'll buy this amount of planes, we'll increase our passenger level, we'll increase our low level. It's communicated to everybody. So all the managers and stations are on board. And in fact, that is reduced to quarters. In this quarter, to achieve that overall goal, in this quarter, we must achieve it. Do we have that? And the leaders at these state enterprises following that?
You know, it's a very good question. In fact, you were asking a question. I was looking at the SOE report for 2015, 2016, 2017. And I'll tell you clearly that it's very disheartening for you to see that despite government subsidy given to the entities, whatever they generated, 46% of what they generated went to overhead. Wow. Imagine that. If you spend 46% of whatever you generated on just overhead, salary, rest of it, what is left for investment activity? Because the first thing that there is that growth comes from investment. So there's no outlay. There should be some policy, from the board and say, look, you're not going to exceed salary and wages, everything supposed not to exceed 30%. Private companies will definitely go like that. Why would you go? And our investment let's consider investment. How much of our intake or revenue will go to investment activity to expand in order for the SOE to grow? You might say 30%. So at the end of the day, they will perform. But surprisingly, despite subsidies coming from government, and they've raised whatever revenue they raised, everything is spent on recurring expenditure, 46%. Why would you say that? So do you anticipate growth? So what is important here, and I will say this, is this one thing that this current government did, but it did it in such a way that is not, probably didn't understand, is a loss too, because they probably say, oh, we are doing harmonization to reduce the salary of SOE, managing directors. But they see once they did a reduction, they also employ more people. So the same money that was deducted was spent on employment of insignificant staff, unproductive staff. So it just amounted to the same reduction. I mean, the same increase in what expenditure. So it didn't make any impact. But the reality here is that you cannot see any of the report. I think 2016, 2017, you see it consistently. Everything is going on what? Overhead, recurring expenditure. So they are running almost like a public entity, not like a private firm. They need to understand that they are both public-private, firm. Therefore, most of their operations should be more focusing on our profit motive. While they are serving the social goal, they should be looking at profit motive. They need to declare at the end of the year, say, look, this is how much we have, and now from this share, we are giving either companies that have the whole share or the boss share, you can divide the dividend at the end of the day, but nothing like that is going on. So there's no growth plan for them. You can go on individual website. I have done that before. When we were doing the you can see, you look at the strategic plan, some of it raising, some of the strategic plan are expired, some still effective. But the reality is that if you look at their statement of income, look at the statement alone, it just gives you a clear picture that these guys are not thinking that your operation cost will be exceeding your revenue. Why would you be doing that? And the operation is not something that's more beneficial to the public. So one, I will go back to is that you need a president, or you need a president who will tell them, or a board chair who will say, look, this is what we're going to be doing. This is your target as an MD for, let's say, transport. Let's say NTA. Look at what NTA has done to the country. They got free buses coming from India, other countries giving buses. At the end of the day, everything go on operation, and there's no extra revenue coming in to buy new buses. In fact, they can't repair those buses, they can't maintain those buses, simply because there's no growth plan. So if you get free equipment to start with, any private firm, you see that the first thing that you declare that thing as asset and pay towards it. Depreciation costs will be taken from there. But at the end of the day, up to now, we don't see that from the state-owned enterprises, and it is going back to the issue of managerial competency.
But they put even should the government be subsidizing the state-owned enterprises in the first place?
Government should come in, and it should be paid, because that's the reason why she's a shareholder. So she can come in, they can do intervention, but the intervention should be refunded after the operation cost. I mean, after the operation and revenue collection for that year. And the essence of that is not to let the entity fall, because they all remember that the SOE also serve a social goal. That is to provide utility. For example, LEC.
Public utility.
LEC has problem with transformer or other initial costs at the end of at the beginning of the year, and they have some limitation. Government can come up with intervention, and that intervention is not going to be free. It's supposed to be tied to the revenue generation, and that then it comes to be there. So come back to the budget, because you can that will be off budgeted expenditure, but it should be appropriated first. That there should be a real forecasting. I'll say, look, in the next 5 years, this is how much we anticipate to raise, and this is how much we anticipate to spend. And the 5-year plan is giving. If there's any shortage at the end of the day, you will justify why you fail. So that's one of the things that every entity, especially SOEs, supposed to be running like a private firm. It shouldn't be about employing more people. Larry talked about capacity. You know, this capacity issue is very serious, because you need to employ the right technician. For example, why is it that Telco, that has almost the best equipment in terms of internet services and telecommunication, has limited services and is unaffordable than Cellcom and Orange, that just taking 20% of the broadband, but they have more customers? It's because they are effective, they are efficient. So why can't we reduce the subsidy? It's a good thing. You reduce it. You give the subsidy. You give the first time. You say, look, this is a cushion for you to start operation. The next year, you reduce the subsidy, and once the guy has passed, you reduce until you get zero. You reach the 0 point, and that will be called capacity building process for the entity.
Thank you.
So I will add to that point. Yes, government can come in in several ways, right? But in 3 ways. That is why the SOEs give the annually or quarterly, they give their balance sheet, their financial statement, because it's owned by the government. So they are on the government account. The SOE's assets and liabilities is also listed, and there are different reports that the SOE. You just alluded to the SOE reports you are reading. So government is supposed to intervene when the SOE is not performing. Is it a management problem? If the person who's there is not doing well, that's why you have a board of director. So the president will call the board of director and the managing director to have a meeting, and then why is the entity not performing? So either re-engineer, or, my friend, it is time for you to go. Call the board of director, my friend, this guy that is there is not performing well. That is why the management have meeting with the board of director periodically, maybe quarterly or so that to check on that. So government can intervene in that sense. Now, government can also put money in, provided, like you said, there's a project. And if you look at your revenue and expenses, and then you look at what is coming as profit, and when you project, that money can be recouped by the government, so that the entity's balance sheet can improve, so that the entity will be able to give more money to support the government's budget. Yet government can make that investment. Government can also provide loan guarantee loans, for long-term development. Okay, if the entity says it's not able to make that guarantee, the government can guarantee, but ensuring that that entity will be able to pay the money, right? So they can do that. They can do that guarantee. For example, the last loan that was recently contracted by the government to build the terminal building, which it is in question now about how they spend the money, whether they was to do other things with the money, including the terminal itself. Yes, government can provide a guarantee, but that money should be used wisely so that it can pay itself back. So that the airport, not government suffering to pay that money back, but the airport, not the airport, but the entity including the airport, can pay that money back.
Thank you,
Of
Alex.
course.
May I ask the question for Larry and William? And William, you go first. Is the government a problem here by making these state-owned enterprises lazy, more like putting them in the budget and giving them money? Or is the problem more a management issue from the side of the state-owned enterprises? I ask the question for this reason. When the financial crisis hit here, the auto industry went in Belize. The US government gave them money that they call bailout. They have payback of recent during COVID, the airlines went into trouble. The federal government gave them money that they're supposed to pay back. Many of them have paid back their money because they are individual and independent entities or corporation. The SOEs are also seen that way, except that they are owned by the government, right? So I'm just trying to say the government might be part of the problem here, or the SOE managers are part of the problem. Which one is?
I think it's a little bit of both. And I think for me personally, if you were to ask me, in my opinion, I think I would lean mostly to say that it's the government that's the problem. Look, I think 3 or 4 months ago, the Deputy Finance Minister, Dr. Samora Wolokoli, was on Spoon TV. And I happened to tune in and I happened to listen. And I was just shocked at what was being spoken about the fact that he had affiliation, very close affiliation to a lot of subcontracts that were being given out. I think it was either at LEC or LWSC. That's a huge issue. And not to waste anybody's time, but what Alex Cuffey said is right. That is horrible governance because this entity is relying on the government to be sustained. And those folks that work there need to take home some kind of income to make a living. So management is in a hard place, not like the US where you could potentially say, hey, I can walk away from this job because of ethical issues and I can find another job. In Liberia, jobs are very scarce. And so individuals are placed in these positions, but they have no power. So they're mostly shown as kind of puppets. So yes, I think for me, I would say it's heavily weighted on the governance of this, because they're after all state-owned enterprises. And these boards are put together. These boards, they're the individuals that controls these boards are nominated by the president, and there's a big sway in there. So management, to me, they're being told, take all the bad publicity, but we're not going to let you go, right? But if you try to stand up to do what is right, the axe is going to come down. And some of them are just bad management, period. But I think the government.
Larry, the government?
Man, that's a tough question you just asked, Anthony. That question is being asked so many times in ethics question, in business ethics. At what point should the government bail out a private entity? That is such a difficult question so the government is definitely the problem. The government is the problem because when you have a situation where an entity can operate where they're consistently losing money and they're just poor management and they cannot go out of business, it creates a moral hazard. So imagine, Anthony, if you know for a fact that if, God forbid, you were to have an accident, let's say you slip or something, and you know for a fact that the insurance company is going to pay you, you will not take care when you're doing stuff because you know as soon as you have an accident, you're going to get compensated. You can stay at home and still get paid. When companies know that no matter how poorly they perform, they're still going to get bailed out, they will always do something that will not be in the best interest for their investors or for the general public. They will always do what is wrong because it's that moral hazard that exists, right? You mentioned something about your company, your management put out metrics. The metrics are there to measure how well the management is doing. They can hold them accountable because at the end of the year, if they don't meet that metrics or even come close, the board can fire them. They can replace them. Who's going to fire those guys when the NPA is doing poorly or Maritime is doing poorly? No one's going to fire them, not especially if you have good connections with the government. That is the problem. There are some entities that provide services. They're not there to really make money, right? Like the water and sewer, they're supposed to provide services, right? But there are some entities that should be making money to be self-sustainable. But like Defu said, when you look at some of these guys' revenue and expenditures, their expenditure is nearly 50% of the revenue they're taking in, and it's just going to salaries. It's an absolute disgrace. Absolute disgrace. So the government is definitely a big problem in this whole thing because these state-owned enterprises, they're not being held accountable. They can spend money or any willy-nilly way, and it shows that. If anything goes wrong, the government will subsidize them. The government is even subsidizing the rice cartel in Liberia. Why is the government subsidizing the rice cartel? It's nonsense. Every year, and this is not just this government. The previous government has been doing it. I believe Ellen probably started it with all these executive order where she's, waiving tariffs against the rice entity. First of all, you shouldn't have a cartel for rice in Liberia. That's nonsense. And it was kind of embarrassing seeing the president go there and seeing all these mountains and mountains of rice, but still not understanding why there was a shortage on the market. He didn't seem to make the connection because despite the fact that cost, prices, everything else is increasing, he doesn't realize that the people the people who are importing rice, they're not putting it out in the market because they're not going to get the best price for it. So he just didn't seem to make that connection. So yeah, definitely the government is an issue because there's always that hope that the government would build them out. Back in 1999, this representative named John Dingell, representative from Michigan, he stood before the Congress here in the United States. The Congress was repealing a law called the Glass-Steagall Act. This law came about in 1934. He stood in front of the legislators and he said, look, listen, repealing this law is going to create a situation where we have entities that are too big to fail. I don't know if you guys ever heard that phrase since then, called too big to fail. Yeah. So that whole too big to fail thing, that means the government always have to step in to bail out these entities because they will start taking risks and start investing in things they shouldn't be investing in. The Port Authority is investing in things they shouldn't be investing in. Maritime is in things they shouldn't be investing in. LEC, they're in things they shouldn't be actually in. And it's just because they know that they cannot file for bankruptcy. The government is going to subsidize or bail them out. So yeah, it's a great question you asked, Anthony. And it kind of leads to how do we solve this problem, right? How do we solve it? I'm not going to dive into that right now, but I just wanted to say that was a great question you asked because it creates that moral hazard. People would do things because they know the government will always subsidize them.
Let me just say this real quick, Anthony. In New York City, New York, about $6 billion a year is lost with the MTA. So the government steps in, of course, for that. So it's not only in Liberia, but our situation is drastic because we don't have the kind of capital like New York.
And Alex and Deborah, if you want to chime in on that same question, then we'll take a break.
Yeah, I wanted to chime in, and I wanted to chime in, and I agree with everybody else. It's the overall governance situation in the country, right? And the tune at the top, it's part of the leadership, crisis we are faced with from time to time in our country. So if the tune at the top is not right, if
what you call tune at the top, my people in Nicrutan don't understand that. Break it down for us.
So the tune at the top is if the head of the country, is strict about governance, good governance, and fighting corruption, and putting the right people into the places and holding them accountable for the result of taking that entity forward, and not allowing cronyism and friendship and everything. And if the person does wrong, you take the action that is right, within the confines of the law. So if you don't take action, if you don't put the right people in places, if you don't provide them the tools, if you don't hold them accountable, if you don't fire them, it's going to be a problem. That's the general tone at the top situation we're having in our country. So it all flows the same way. That issue of the governance crisis, the leadership crisis that we have in our country.
How many
the state enterprises are not. They don't operate in isolation. Nothing operating in isolation in the country. Everything operates together. So when that enabling environment is not provided to proper governance of the country, you have a situation.
Yeah, Deborah, go ahead. 1 minute, and then we'll go for a break.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, what I want to say here is that we are facing the problem because this issue of transparency and accountability has been the main problem with Liberia, whether with state-owned enterprise or with government. Government own it, but government is not accountable to make it transparent and disclose information to public. Therefore, the SOE themselves rely on that and don't want to be accountable and disclose information to the public. By right, these guys are supposed to be having their financial statement published on their website. They should be in the position to forecast the product, prices for product, basic services they provide. It should be marketable and on a daily basis. They say, look, for water, to get water installation in your home, it will cost you this amount, and publish it on their website and publish it on government or put in the newspaper. And on a daily basis, people should be in a position of, without transparency, it will be difficult for us to govern ourselves, be it with state-owned enterprises or with ministry and agency. So we have to look at it from that perspective as well.
Thank you. Transparency, accountability, he said, are the ways to go, ensuring that these state-owned enterprises are managed effectively and efficiently for the benefit of the people. We'll take a short break. We'll be right back.
At Focus on Liberia, we discuss everything Liberia, from education to politics, arts and culture, entertainment, agriculture, history, religion, family, and technology. Focus on Liberia uncovers and showcases the best of Liberia and shows the world the truth about Liberia. We educate, elevate, and promote all things Liberia. We conduct interviews, panel discussions, debates, and more. Tune in to Focus on Liberia on Facebook and YouTube and be a part of the stories that make up the news.
This is Focus on Liberia, and I am Dennis Ja.
Thank you, folks, for staying with us. The program you are watching is Focus on Liberia, on Focus on Liberia, and also Prime FM 105.5 in Liberia. Gentlemen, let's go to some specifics here. I want us to start with the energy sector. We'll dray on LEC a little more, then we'll go to the airport. Then we'll talk about the rice crisis, shortage, I should call it, that is being talked about now. Larry used an important phrase there, rice cartel. I got a big question for him. He will tell us what a rice cartel. Gentlemen, between 2005 and 2017, the energy sector received at least US $2 billion in flow of support to the government of Liberia. Despite that money, and probably the government might have spent his own money there too, I'm hoping, we are having serious challenges with electricity. It's said that the sources we're getting the power from are the problem, the facility the problem. Why are we at this place, despite the level of money that have been pumped into the country to provide stable electricity for our people? Larry, you go first.
Plain and simple, we don't put the money that is coming into the most effective use. Why? Because, again, and I would kind of just take the phrase from, I think someone mentioned it on the chat somewhere. It has to do with leadership and management at these state-owned enterprises. You're receiving this level of money. If there was a possibility that you can go out of business, you would make better use of that money. But because these entities know they're not going to go out of business, no matter how poorly they perform, the worst case scenario is they might just get reshuffled, maybe put somewhere else. They don't come out to do the best jobs. And in fact, the management, the leadership, and what you're seeing happening over at LEC is just a result of government interference. And I think Ambassador McCarthy said it best. He said it when he said, look, there are government officials who are influencing LEC. These guys are influencing LEC, the power theft that is going on in the country. There's a group of people that are involved in it, and some of them are being influenced by government officials. The government owes LEC a ton of money. So it goes to show that state-owned enterprise, the whole concept of a state-owned enterprise in Africa hasn't worked well at all. In some countries, in the West, it works. It hasn't done extremely well in Liberia. And I think it's time to start thinking about, look, let's start getting rid of some of these enterprises and privatize them.
And Larry, that's the follow-up question I wanted to bring to you. Privatization of these state-owned enterprises. How would that be different, and why would it be different?
There are two things you would need in privatization. You would need, because the privatization aspect of it, it can't just be 100% free enterprise. The people who are coming in just go ahead and start charging to maximize stockholders' wealth. You can't have that. You will have a disaster. So it has to be private, but still regulated. There are very few countries that have 100% free enterprise. Countries like Singapore, Hong Kong, and some of those countries. But you would need to privatize it, meaning a private entity will come in. They will provide the services. They would do so at a profit, because government officials will not be able to influence the private company that just invested $200-300 million in the enterprise. No, they want to recoup their money. So it's not like, oh, my man, you're my friend, give me free electricity. No, he needs to, recoup his money. Like your boss, like you mentioned in your company, he's going to put out a metrics at the end of the day to meet that. If the management is not meeting those metrics, they're going to get fired. So you can have the privatization. At the same time, it still needs to be regulated. Otherwise, it will end up harming the people if it's not regulated. But it needs to be privatized.
Let's come to this hydro thing we hear about. There's so much money being spent to renovate instead of building a new one. That renovation work, we understand, got completed at some point. Of recent, we are hearing that the turbine, I think 3 of them are completed out of service, and we have only 1. We heard from the final minister, let's pray for the rain to come, then the whole problem will be solved. But can we rely on the rain? Will dry season not come again?
Yeah, but I mean, Anthony, we always had the rain season and dry season, and the problem with rain season, I mean, light coming on, good during the dry season, right? And then we had the power outages and the load shedding during the dry season. It happened before the war. It's happening now. It's because of the way the dam was, the McCoffey Dam was built originally, right? Mm-hmm. It was built, from my understanding, I'm sure that we'll have the expert here to talk about it, but from what I read, it was built on the river in a way that would take the water and do its circulation, but it didn't have something to keep the water, to store the water, so that during times when the water base is drying up, so that we have reservoir of water that will pump the electricity, right? Mm-hmm. So what was supposed to be done, instead of repairing that one, we were supposed to actually build, with all that money, was actually to build a new dam that will, or move to something else that the world is moving towards now. Like my brother William will always say, that we're leaving from this dam business, we're moving to modern technology. But for the sake of the conversation, build a new dam on the river, which will have the capacity to hold water, so that when it's dry season, we'll have the reserve. like the way they're doing in America now. There's shortage of oil on the market, so they authorize, putting more of their reserve oil out so that the price can stabilize. So we're supposed to build that dam that has that capacity to hold the water. Now, nonetheless, we had this other situation with the West Africa Power Pool, the CLSG, the Ivory Coast, Sierra Leone, Liberia, Guinea project. So it seems as though, from what I hear, we have power, but the problem is with its distribution, its transmission and distribution, right? We generate power, but then we hear now that we owe Ivory Coast because this power that we have, all right, is coming from Ivory Coast. So you will see that places like Maryland has light, Nimba has light, but this light that is being used, are people not paying for them? So how come we owe Ivory Coast 9 million and this other million, that other million, and we are not able to pay? Are we not making money from this power that we're distributing, that these people are using? Is institutions of government or other institutions not paying? What about the power theft situation? What are we doing with the power theft situation? So you have things that we could do. Even if we don't build the new dam that will store the water during the dry season, we have some power. It's my understanding we have even more power that we can even distribute. It's my understanding. So what is the problem? This is something that we need to fix.
Therefore, on top of what Mr. Alex Coffey just said, I also hear that the previous administration made this decision to renovate instead of build because electricity was needed. They needed power. We have just come from war. There was investment opportunities that were to come to the country. And one of the demands there was that, look, we needed power for this institution or the investment company to come. So we can renovate now. We will get the power we need now that will encourage other investors to come into the country. So they went and did that. Do you think that was the best decision at the time? Did it take into consideration the long-term stability for the provision of electricity?
Yes, I think the feasibility study. One thing, let me clarify here from my introduction. It's clear that you had 24 megawatt, before the war, and the turbine that was there was just single turbine. It was two, one go off, one come online, and these were destroyed. So the new process, it might appear like renovation, but the stock remained there, but they try to build on it and decide to build new 4 turbines, which came up to 88 megawatt. And that itself was substantial enough to give enough power to the city and to the country. In addition to this 88 megawatt, there were already arrangements with WAP, electricity that are coming in from Cote d'Ivoire, and also government also signed agreement contract with the 4 countries. They have a shareholder or own the CLSG. The 4 countries went together and also established the CLSG, which is the company to supply electricity to augment whatever they have domestically. So for the extended source. So the problem that there is that Liberia's problem right now, the next phase was, like Ellie said, was supposed to build a, what we call dam or water support. If there's any problem challenging the dry season, that will be backup. And besides that, there was a solar panel arrangement, solar field, to also support it to ensure that it maintained that 88 megawatt throughout the year. But what we are saying now in Liberia is just unfortunate, because whenever I think about it, while it is true that, people talk about geopolitics and all of these arguments, many feasibility studies that were done, if we're going to go relocate to find a new location for the dam to build, it will cost us more money than what was being given as a gift. So the 4 turbine The first thing that there, one is complete, one got burned. 3 left online. The 3 that left online, 2 now develop problem. So you only have 1 now that is still functional. So is it because of the money that was spent? Is it, or because our inability to manage what has been given to us? And I can say this to you clearly, that the argument of, oh, you should have invested in different hydro and go to another place, people who provided the money have said, look, what's the possibility? They did a feasibility study going to Maryland to put a hydro, or going to Ghana and transmission to Monrovia, versus doing the existing area, expanding the capacity to ensure that enough supply is given. Which one is preferable? Economically speaking, at the time, that was the right decision to be made. And that was the reason why they went to the factory, and there was a special commission made request to build a turbine specifically for that purpose. What I see here, which we will always go back to, is the issue of leadership and competency. The few distribution that have been done, unfortunately, we don't have this opportunity for people to exercise the whistleblower act. If you are being given opportunity today in Monrovia or Liberia to say whistleblower for LEC, they will tell you clearly that the problem, power theft we're talking about, is not from Nickel Town, and Nickel Town disrupting it, or the power theft that is coming from West Point causing that problem. The consumption in West Point and Nickel Town is very minimal to affect or damage the hydro or the turbine. It's because of serious cartel, pollution in the system, that higher up powers have the ability, companies that have the ability to even pay, are going through the system and giving illegal current, as well, causing all of these damages to our equipment. And that's purely, I would say, total incompetence caused the problem. But we're still dwelling on, oh, the $2 billion for us who have done this. If someone, they have not taken into consideration all the managerial costs and shipment and everything that were done within the 15 years we're talking about. Because there was a lot of structure put up. You have the HFO in West Point, Point 4 is there as well. All of these facilities were built through the same money we are talking about. As we speak, none of these things are functional. Is it because of the investment or because of the management? So it's not more of a defense, but the reality there is that you cannot manage an equipment that is giving you for your survival, for your productivity and your lifetime. You cannot destroy and say, oh, because they spent too much money and build and renovate it. Renovation is that the turbine was spoiled and they fix it. But they cannot build new turbine. It's called a renovation. You know, that's one of the things we need to take it out. Widow is a man who had a background in that. If that's a renovation, then he will clarify that. But to build new turbine, 4 new turbine and install it and say renovation, we don't call that renovation. That's a clarification I want to make first. Now,
Thank you.
Next, okay, let me just.
No, hang your thought there. Go ahead, hang your thought, please.
Yeah. The next thing you need to be looking at there is that people talking about on the dry season. Good. The dry season argument that is here, you have the opportunity to feed into the CLSG line that will also link to the same hydro to have more power. Now you have more power generation. The CLSG line is still there. We refuse to connect that and say yes. To connect it to the hydro, even to give the feed. As we speak, we got 4 stations in Liberia already commissioned. But the government of Liberia decided not to make the payment because it's a corporation. All of them have shares in it, 25% shares. Guinea, Ivory Coast, Sierra Leone, Liberia. But come and pay your installment fee. We cannot afford to do that. Instead, we are waiting for the turbine or for rain season to come. Even if rain season comes today, you cannot operate on one turbine when you have 4 brand new turbines.
Wow. So even the rainy season cannot help us. Willen, we're talking about leadership, the issue of distribution, because we have a major source that's coming from Ivory Coast. So this is more about money and leadership and maybe expertise to provide what is already available, because we have the power available. The distribution is one problem. The leadership is another. When are we going to get this right, William?
Well, Anthony, to be honest with you, I'm not sure when we're going to get it right, because it has to do with a lot with governance. But let me just take 1 minute and let me give you an idea of what our competitors are actually doing and what we're kind of missing out on. Just 1 minute. In Ivory Coast, the Ivory Coast Electricity Company is a private provider of electricity. They operate within 50 square kilometers. They have 6 hydroelectric plants, about 604 megawatts, 1 thermal plant, 100 megawatts, and they export electricity to 6 countries. Now, the Ivory Coast Electricity Company, they own about 46%. The other 54% is owned by Aeronov. Aeronov is a private French company. Now, Aeronov, the majority of what is owned by Aeronov is by a private equity firm that is stationed both in Africa and in the US. It is about a $2 billion private equity firm. So I say that to wrap up to say that, listen, the business of electricity is moving along. There are many players in there, and there always a pursuit for more profit areas and more profit sector. I think back to Alex's comment, and it speaks very strongly, is that we have a very poor governance and we have a very poor structure. And these are professionals who get paid big bucks, and they scour the globe for opportunities. And let me tell you, Liberia as a competitive option out there right now is not a huge priority. And if we're not careful with the advent of the WAPP and the CLSG, what that allows is that countries who have the infrastructure and the governance in place, they can increase productivity and increase power generation plants, and they can just begin to distribute it all around and look over Liberia. So we need to fix that. That's going to be a serious problem, and we can really make it happen, but it starts more and more with our governance and our management. And I think we have a hill to climb, and I'm not sure if our government they really understand the business of electricity and how it can really be helpful to the development of our country. So we in for a long run.
Thank you. And gentlemen, let's come to the issue of solution with the power thing, but we're going to tie in the airport there. Let me read some information here for you. In November of 2014, the European Investment Bank agreed with the government of Liberia to provide 27.3 million loan over a period of 20 years to support the rehabilitation project of the RIA. The total cost of the new passenger terminal project is 50 million. That's got done by the Ellen Johnson Sirleaf administration, while the runway refurbishment was completed at a cost of $30 million. And funding the terminal projects was provided by the China Import Bank through a 22-month, $49.8 million concession loan. Folks, I'm reading this because money has been made available to continue to maintain the airport. It said that during the renovation, not renovation, the construction of the terminal, how come first they missed the issue of power supply for the airport? It said that they were relying on the hydro. It said that they were relying on the West African Power Pool current to provide electricity for the airport, for which they did not build anything for the airport to provide electricity for it. What was responsible for that? And now that we have been running on generators and that has not been sustainable, how did they get to know that now? When we have money available that's set aside, from what I've read, why they didn't tap into that particular funding to ensure that they provide a reliable source of energy for the airport? Any of you can go first.
I guess we can say in the private sector, failure is not an option. But in the government sector, failure is always an option. Because it's like when you know there's not going to be any consequences to you failing, there's a more chance that you end up failing anyway. Because, and you see, the one thing you mentioned in the thing you just posted, Anthony, was it requires investment. It requires money to do these things. The concessional loan, these things have to be paid, first of all. But in the private sector, when you know you have to pay back this money, you would do your feasibility study. You would bring in experts to run these organizations, to run these entities, to make sure that you are maximizing your investment, your stockholders' investment. It's not that way in Liberia. And it's not that way for a lot of African countries where you have state-owned enterprises. So in government, failure is always an option. So you always have this situation where things like the investment in RIA will always be a failure. LEC will always be a failure. NPA would be, you have all these situations because state-owned enterprises are not very efficient at all. Why? Because people just accept failure as sometimes it's the normal thing to do.
All right.
So Anthony, the airport situation in terms of power, okay, and everything is like a stopgap. Before the war, or even after the war, the airport had always had 2 or 3 sources of electricity, right? The city, the country, the LEC light, and then some amount of power from Firestone. Okay. Then there is generators, right? Which are always backup. Okay. But when everything broke down, the airport seemed to be depending on Firestone, right? And Firestone also was pressed. So there was an agreement back and forth with Firestone up to 2008, 9, 10, thereabout. The airport was still getting that power, but then there was this, back and forth with Firestone. Firestone had it was feeling on its own capacity because this LEC power was not coming in, so they had their own power generating dam they had there. But so they eventually pulled that power away from the airport. So what we did in the interim, as part of the emergency works at the airport, and that was not to stay to be there for long, hoping that the long-term project would have come on, and also which also included all these power thing with solar panel and all that stuff, which was part of the long-term development. So 2 huge generators, 2 big generators, 500 kVA, 500 kVA generators were bought and were installed as part of the emergency works that we did. So that provided, and then we bought another. The management bought another 110 kVA generator to provide second part. So these different generators provided current for the airport in different aspects. So the light was there, but of course these things need to be maintained. They need to be cleaned up and stuff like that. But then you can't depend on generator for the rest of the time. That those generators were only there hoping that this whole LEC thing was going to be, with all these monies that we're receiving, like we discussed earlier, was going to come on. The airport was going to get on the national power grid, and then these generators were going to be used back up. But unfortunately, this is where we are. LEC is not coming on. It's having the same problem, and then so those generators burn out.
Anthony, can I ask a question?
Sorry, go ahead.
So, worst case scenario, so the airport is running off generator. God forbid, plane coming in, loses, the airport loses power. Let's say, God forbid, plane crashes and people survive, or a lot of people die. Who gets held liable for that?
No, those generators were built with something that calls synchronizing. So one.
No, I understand the whole concept of the generator. I'm just trying to see if there's some, because in the private sector, the company gets held liable for running the airport. But who in this instance gets held liable? Generator goes out, light goes off, plane crashes. Who pays the consequences? I mean, just your thoughts, just your opinion.
It's the government.
So that is why
it is government that owns it, and it's government that's operating it. Obviously, if there's any other lawsuit, they go to the RIA management will be held liable, and by extension, the government of Liberia will be held liable in this case. So, having answered that, I need to just. We have to look at the
But Deborah, before you come in, thank you for your answer. But that is why one of the reasons why these airlines take insurance, right? But that is one of the reasons why our airport, among all the different reasons why some of these airlines can pull out, is because the risk of doing business, taking their plane to the airport, their insurance go up, right? And when their insurance go up, it becomes expensive. It's a loss leader. Why go there? People like Brussels can manage to be there because they're doing a network of West Africa, and so that's why they come from Sierra Leone, or they don't normally terminate in Liberia. They come from Sierra Leone to pick up people. They come from Ghana to pick up people. So they're doing it in a way that they will remain in the country. But so people like Air France, people like Delta, they wouldn't stay. So that's why we don't have.
And that's a great point, Alex. And Duke was also right. But it's a great point, Alex, because the private sector try to manage their risk. When they see there's a lot of risk in a certain environment, they will try to minimize that risk by pulling out. So if a private entity is running the airport and they see, hey, wait a second, losing power, it becomes a serious issue, or this generator thing is not working, they will try to solve that right away. That's what makes state-owned enterprise so inefficient, whereas the private sector becomes more efficient because they try to solve the issues. Whenever there's an airline crash anywhere in the world, we know that the U.S. NTSB, the National Transportation Safety Bureau, sends investigators there because they try to improve the systems and the mechanisms so the next time it doesn't happen, it minimizes the risk. But we don't see that happening in terms of state-owned enterprises in Liberia, because when something happens and there's a failure, God forbid there's a failure of the electric grid, or there's a lack of electricity at the hospital, who gets held liable? People losing their lives. Right? Government Liberia, Depo, I understand that it should be held liable, but it's rare that you can really take anyone within the government to court or have them, take care of their family or cover the cost for that situation. So it's a serious issue that shows another reason why state-owned enterprises are completely inefficient.
Okay.
All right.
Then I'm coming back to the issue of electricity. I think we didn't complete this. The question Anthony asked first was that building an airport without electricity up to now running on generator, why? And I think that question is a very good question, because I don't think the anticipation was for RIA to be out of electricity by now.
No, not at all. No.
The same thing we're talking about is that, in fact, the CLSG commission was done right by the airport during the ECOWAS convention, which myself were coordinating. And the anticipation was that by 2019, everything will have been on course. In fact, LEC is according to their own grade plan, they should actually reach RIA by 2017, but they delayed. So in all fairness, because of the whole transition, that's one of the things I said, that we need to look at the issue of leadership and the transition. The CLSG line is being offered at 19 cents. And LEC is now giving power for 35 cents. And right now, government is trying to see how best they can bring the rate down for 25 cents, at 25 cents. What good will it do for you to say, no, I'm not going for this CLSG line. The money is too much, but I'm going to allow the power to waste and struggle to even like your airport and major facility and major industrial area. What good will that do for you? So these are decisions made at this time and decisions in the past. Look at the cost implication for us. We are almost losing revenue from the airport because of the same decision. What you lost from the airport and what you also lost from the highway, because a lot of cross-border trade as a result of lack of electricity, also reducing decline in the trade movement. These are all of the questions that we need to look at. So by right, for me, some of the right solution right now is for the government to go, since there's no way, I don't think they have the ability or the capacity or resources to repair the turbine and the rest of it, is to go for the CLSG line, which is already at the airport location. It's not a distance from the airport, because they have distribution in Buchanan and also distribution now at Suffering and distribution for Pipman. So why waste time on that? It will cost you to make a decision. Go ahead and make the decision. It's simple as that. So 19 cents, government can still take it and sell it at 25 cents. You're still making 6 cents. And the consumption, RIA has high consumption, Firestone got high consumption. You also make it mandatory, most of the industrial area take this electricity, and the community benefit as a result. Their consumption will also cover all the costs for the poor, which will be the social expenditure. The more consumption from the industrial sector and the better price we give to the industrial sector, it also give the opportunity for it to cover all for the poor. So why not make the decision?
And good point there, Depo. And this is where the management is losing revenue, or the country is losing a lot of revenue, because you don't have stability. The news is going out there to airlines that there's an airport in West Africa, Liberia to be specific, that cannot provide even electricity for its airport. This is the only international airport that we have. I mean, come to think about it, I mean, are the people going to even take us serious? And that the electricity is just nearby, it's not far away, and the airport management cannot make a decision to connect themselves to the reliable source of power, and then use
the management cannot take the power unless the government agree to subscribe. Because if the subscription will have to be done by government, according to the agreement.
I know that is the management decision, or to reach out to the government. Hey, this is how we can provide reliable electricity for the airport, because they are losing revenue here. Air France is pulling out. So what's going to happen? This is my area. What's going to happen now is that the price of a ticket going to go up because you have fewer planes traveling on the route. So Liberia government is going to be generating less revenue. Now, the issue of COVID tests, they collecting $75 to enter, $75 to leave. Where is that money going? William?
Anthony, I try not to speak or comment on political stuff.
This is not political stuff. This is
I know business
issue. This is
definitely
issue.
Look, when you have a budget and everyone gets an increase in their budget, And if you go to Liberia and you see some of the nicest cars, and you see our statesmen in these nice cars, and at night when it gets dark and you just hear all that noise from the generator, you can't help but feel that we have misplaced priorities. Okay, misplaced priorities. There is no way in the world right now, with what's going on in Liberia, that there's any kind of financial profit being generated in Liberia at the level that we expect. Okay, so I mean, it is bad all around. It is bad. The electricity stuff is bad. Everyone knows what to be done, what needs to be done, but once again, everyone is tied to the governance, and governance has just been very poor. I'm sorry, but I mean, it is bad. Okay, so what more can I actually say? I mean,
thank you, Willen. There's nothing more.
We'll be long. We like to say we're still long inside.
Yeah, that's true. Let's bring in comments here, folks. Let us bring in comments from our viewers, and then after that, we'll go to the rise issue and close here. This is from Wallo. Thank you. We yet to learn from these great minds. I hope Twer is even here. If he honor a fake name, let him learn. All right. Christopher Flomo here. The concept of managing public corporations with private management styles emitted from the new public management approach. Martin Wehrman Brown, the SOE are government owned, but they are struggling because of the lack of reliability and accountability. Christopher, again, most countries in Africa are now adopting the public-private partnership, PPP, model to managing state-owned enterprises. River says Pro is total privatization of corporation good for our country. Wehrman Brown again. Corruption, mismanagement, and efficiency is seriously killing the SOEs. LWSC can relate. Up to present, we haven't gotten anything. Is that update about the investigation on the Liberian Water and Sewer Corporation? Lots of comments here from J. Cephas here. I worked for the MPA in 1978. That was 2 years after my birth. So I just called someone who would know about development and expansion of the port. I was just told that 6 million had been put aside for development, and France was coming in with 100 million. Then the overthrow happened. Cephas is basically, I owned 3 businesses at one time. One was failing. I tried to support the failing one with revenue from the others. I quickly realized it was bad business. Each business must stand alone. Leadership is the problem. Let's hear from Ja Blamo. The ridiculous notion that the head of the country is the reason for every problem in Liberia is the source of every problem in Liberia. Sadly, our solution over the last 200 years is change the leadership, meaning the president. The presidency is our biggest excuse for doing nothing and practicing learned helplessness. Consequently, we have become a nation of helpless people. The very environment and culture in Liberia enables foolishness and corruption. And one man, a Messiah, Facebook said that is too long. Jimmy Eastman writes, politicians are directly responsible for the LEC's failure. They are short-sighted. They are short-sighted, greed and abuse. I think it meant short-sighted, and greed and abuse of politicians is responsible. Power theft is not the scapegoat, obscuring the large theft. Let me read more comments here from Vasco or Sumo. We're getting tired with your plenty talking all day on Facebook. Liberian talk too much, nothing to show. Maybe you can show us yours. For us, we do talking. Didn't someone say we have defaulted on our CLSG commitment to Ivory Coast? let alone talk expanding to the airport. Of course, we have defaulted, and that is a fact. Jimmy again, government-run businesses, I think he meant, are challenging even in the U.S. Then how about poor Liberia, where incompetence and corruption is mainstream? And let me read the final one, gentlemen. Alfonso Wia is failing because he has more politicians appointed in his government than leaders who will find solutions in facing the problems in our country. Gentlemen, let's get a minute each from you to the comments, and then we'll go to the rice issue and close.
Jimmy Eastman is right. Imagine here in the U.S., the government-owned enterprises are struggling. He's right. What do you think about a place like Liberia, where you have leadership and management issues? It's going to be even worse. And I like what Alfonso is saying. You have more politicians than technocrats running state-owned enterprise. No surprise, you're going to end up with a situation you currently find yourself in. So yeah, I'll take that. That'll be my minute. I'll pass the remainder of my time over to one of the panelists.
And I couldn't agree with you. For me, I'm not afraid to mention people. Jefferson Koji is an example. This guy who never had a job in his life. He put in over Liberia City Corporation. What do you expect, right? He's a proper politician anyway. Anyway, that is not an issue here. William, any response?
No, I think all the commenters, I agree with their comments.
Okay.
Therefore, you can have some of my time.
I think I agree with the callers. I mean, the people who send the message. But one thing I want to say here, one of the comments talk about we look up to presidency, and I would say yes. For me, I'm thinking that's the right approach because the leadership from the top. You see that President Toba started well, and you see the difference in his administration and the rest of the presidents ever rule in Liberia. So it's important when we look at someone who the person should come with that experience, leadership, and willingness to change and change their own life before changing the country. So I think it's important. Lastly, it is true, we defaulted, but we still have room to go back realistically. With the CLSG line, the WAP line, the rest of it, you can still go back and do a negotiation and make commitment, and they do the connection, and you make a payment plan. Yeah, this is a sovereign state, and these are all members. Member states that establish the firm. So it's possible to find solution to the problem than for us to sit and be crying.
Mr. Coffey?
Yeah, Anthony, there was a long one there from someone who talked about always blaming the leader and things like that. I wonder if you could put it back on.
Okay, let me see if I can find it here quickly.
It was long about blaming the leader, I think. So, the ridiculous notion that the head of the country is the reason for every problem in Liberia, is the source of every problem in Liberia. Okay, so the reason why we talk about leadership now, the problem, say for example, in your home, if you, the head of the home, is not managing your home, is not sending the right message to those that look up to you, if you're not checkmating your children, if you are coming home drunk, if you have been caught stealing and stuff like that, your home is going to break down. All right? In America, why do you think they say they get ratings? Why do you think they say Biden's rating is going down, all-time low, 40%? Why do you think they say this president rating is going down? Because they're saying the population, those things are done by the people responding, all right? Those surveys are done. Citizens are the one who respond to those surveys, and they ask different questions. And based on the answers those people gave, that's how they get the ratings. So if a country is performing well, who else do you blame? So if a country is performing good, who else who takes the glory? It's the president, right? If the president does not pass down the strong message for accountability, for proper management of different institutions, you have a problem. You take Ghana, for example. Ghana had all these different successive coups and things. The country literally broke down. Ghanaians were economic refugees in different countries, including Liberia. But when Gerald Rawlings took over, like him or hate him, he took over, he changed that country, he provided leadership, he took drastic action that changed that country. Paul Kagame in Rwanda, he came to power. Liberia had the same kind of war we had, the same period. They had genocide. He came and changed that country. Today, you see the streets of Rwanda sparkling clean as a leader. Lee Kuan Yew in Singapore is another example who changed a country for the better. So if the leader does not provide the way, if the leader does not make sure that the ministers and everybody are performing well, all the different institutions are performing well, if they don't hold people accountable, if they don't encourage and promote good governance, if they don't ensure that the rule of law is upheld, if they don't ensure that corruption is taken to the back burner, I mean, it's not going to be eradicated totally, but it is reduced to the bare minimum, you have a problem. So that is why we need that leader. That's why we're always saying this. We're not saying that because we're trying to blame the president or the head of the country. No. That is why the president should be able to, if the president put a minister there and the minister is not performing well, he's not providing leadership for that entity. So move him and put somebody who can provide that leadership so we can get the services that the entity was supposed to provide for the country, for the citizens. That's what we're saying.
Thank you, gentlemen. Let us finally chime on this rice shortage that has been reported. Let's start with you, Larry. You threw some meat out there that there is a rice cartel that is operating in Liberia. What do you mean when you say rice cartel? And let us dwell on solutions a little more. We all know rice is our staple food in Liberia. There's so much importation. There are so many people involved with the importation, and the price of rice, has been fluctuating, and now we're hearing about shortage. Rice also a political commodity in Liberia, so government, has to tread cautiously here, so that there will not be some form of arrest or political blowback against them. So, Larry, first to you, you said there's a cartel.
Yeah, when you have a small group of individuals who are controlling a commodity, or whether they're producing that commodity or controlling a certain commodity, that is pretty much the definition of cartel. Cartel is illegal pretty much in every country because cartels are totally inefficient. So you have a limited group of people who are importing rice and who are giving authority to kind of, sell rice at a wholesale. That is a totally inefficient way to run or to put your staple goods out there on the market. It's not the best way to do it. The president is missing one thing. He's looking back at the different riots, the rice riot and all that stuff. And he believed that, by fixing prices, because what China Wade did back in the 70s was it has something to do with change in the price of rice. So he figured about fixing the price of rice is going to solve the problem. But he's missing the other end to it. You can also have problems created due to a scarcity of the product being on the market. So when he went into those warehouses looking around and seeing hundreds of thousands of rice, he was kind of impressed, saying, oh, we don't have a shortage. But he completely misses, and you see, this is where the people advising the president has to give him good advice. They have to tell him, well, Mr. President, just because the rice is in the warehouse doesn't necessarily mean that it's on the market. Because Peru tried this stuff. Every country that has tried fixing prices have ended up in disaster. The only time I would say that government-controlled prices tend to work is usually in places like Morocco during Ramadan. During Ramadan, they'll have price control, but it's for a short period of time. It works in a very short, limited period of time. Over a long period of time, it'll have the completely opposite effect of price control. Because what happens, it leads to black market. People need to get their hands on that rice. It leads to black market. Where in a world where you see a Liberian man going to Lebanon and becoming one of the prime suppliers of one of the staple foods in Lebanon? It's never going to happen. How come just the opposite seems to happen in Liberia? It's nonsense. We need to fix that. And you see the fact that Madam Sirleaf have been doing this executive order, giving them the ability to avoid paying tariffs on importing rice. That nonsense has to stop. I believe it was one of the first things that President Weah did when he came into power, issued this executive order to avoid having the rice importers pay tariffs. You have to let, to a certain extent, you have to let the market determine, prices, supply and demand. And if there's an issue with the prices, bring in more suppliers and see what happened to the price of rice. It will fall. There is no way it's not going to happen where the president can say, oh, we're going to fix price at under $14 and it's going to stay. Right now, wheat, petroleum, prices are rising because of the war in Ukraine. Ukraine and Russia puts out over 30% of the total supply of wheat in the market. The price of oil is going to go up. Gasoline price is going to go up. So who is going to be the supplier in Liberia who the price of their supply chain, the price of bringing goods into the country is going to go up, and they can still sell the same commodity at the exact same price? It's not going to happen at all.
So Larry, let's talk a little more solution here. I know you earlier, you just said that, look, you have to increase the number of importers. If you have fewer persons importing the rice, that's less competition. You're going to have what we have right now. Now, on top of that, are there other tools that government can use? They always using this executive order to reduce tariff, and yet we'll come back to the same thing. Are there other tools available? Issue of subsidy, is that an option to explore? How can we keep the price so low when we are not manufacturing Liberia or producing rice in Liberia, but importing? What are the tools that we have or can be used?
Great question, Anthony. Great question. You're absolutely correct. If you go to do price control at a national level, it's not sustainable, number one. And number two, it becomes extremely expensive for the producers. The other tool you can do is more strategic, right? And this is kind of in line with the pro-poor agenda. That's what the whole thing of pro-poor means. You're empowering the poor people. You can definitely give, whether it's some type of a subsidy or direct money to poor people who can then use that as a type of subsidy to purchase the rice. Because the price control for the entire country as a whole doesn't benefit anyone. The pro-poor agenda should mean, okay, it's like same thing like Biden did in this country and Obama have done. You give cash based on people's income directly to the people. Statistically, over time, when you look at the literature, you look at past experience in other countries, that has much more impact than setting price controls on the entire country. So yeah, you lean on the absolute correct point, Anthony. There should be some type of a subsidy, but it should go directly to poor people who need that subsidy to purchase the stick. Yes, that is another competent solution to the problem.
Mr. Coffey, you are aware of the pro-poor rice. I had thought the government was going to be able to sustain it because they put their mantra on it. This is their governance mantra, pro-poor rice. It disappeared. And then we came back to the importers. How can we as a country maintain a price that will be affordable for the citizen and at the same time ensure the distribution of sufficient rice on the market?
Yeah, I mean, Larry couldn't have said it any better, right? Mm-hmm. So, but talking about the pro-poor rice, this is when we talk about intervention, and so there could have been an intervention if the government had the pro-poor rice wherever it was produced from or where it was
the poor is laughing.
Exported from, or imported from. It should have flooded the market by this time, so that you create the competition with the other rice seller, so that they can bring their prices down because the competition will determine the price. So in this time, like Larry said, the prices of certain commodities will go up. Like petroleum is going up, went up in the United States of America to $4.50 and around there. Now it has come down, right, because of the intervention of the government to put more gas out there, to put more petroleum products out there. So if the government has that pro-poor rice, this is a time to intervene in the market with that proper rice. But again, like what Elios Page said, I'm sorry if I didn't pronounce it incorrectly. He said the president did not go, he or she said the president did not go to the warehouse to address the issue. He was upset with the media and took a trip to prove his point. He addressed the media. So was it just about addressing the media or addressing the problem? Right? So again, I mean, the intervention, whether you reduce certain things for the supply, because the price of rice or any commodity, for example, if the person import that commodity in a country, based on the cost and the other associated costs, that's how the person is going to determine the price, and based on the competition in the market. So again, government has to make a serious intervention to solve that problem, and not just addressing the media.
And Depo, it appears that way, right? Because you have a problem, you have to look for your options, your tools that you can use. I mean, you just go into the warehouse, taking pictures, sending it on Facebook for Liberian to see and give the impression that, oh, rice is here. It doesn't actually solve the problem. I mean, I will even consider it at the seed. You have a serious problem here. Either it's with distribution, and you think just by taking pictures and making people to see it, it solves the problem. Mr. Coffee just talked about the proper resting, because this is a serious matter. There was a program we were told was going to be sustained. What happened to that? This is one of the times now you should use the proper rice as an intervention mechanism to help with the stress because of this gas prices that is adding to maybe the prices of feed. Because when they're importing the rice, they burn fuel to bring it, right? So let you the economy.
The first thing that there is that despite the issue of proper rice and gas price from Ukraine war, we all need to know. In fact, the IMF reported that in 30 years since the COVID, the shipment costs across the world have increased, and we are all aware that with the increase in shipment costs, it's the direct pass-through inflation to any country that imports. So we don't expect prices to remain the same when there are increase in the cost of shipment across the world globally. So those who are doing price analysis should be looking at all of these factors, these variables that also are imputed into the price of any commodity. So the government have made a decision 4 years ago that rice price should remain at $12 or $13, and there's an increase in freight costs around the world globally. It's a global phenomenon. You cannot say that, oh, we made a decision, we will stand by it. You first of all needed to have done your market survey, market assessment to inform the president about, look, what are the global prices and what led to the increase in prices and all of these things. Like that, you are now coming to the importers to have a better conversation on what's the difference in the freight costs and how can this issue be addressed. The next thing that there is that you don't have control over input supply. You cannot be the one to be making decisions to say, look, you know what, you have to sell it at this price. Rice production since the global market, I mean, the COVID-19 has also declined. And these are all variables. If you listen to global news and global study, India that supply Liberia, Thailand, because of the COVID-19, they have serious constraints in terms of productivity and their output decline. Therefore, their shipment, the export to other countries will definitely reduce as a result of this decline in production. You are not going to be looking at all of these variables to say that you want rice price to remain at $13 or $12. Yep. You have to be very reasonable enough as a country. That's not a unique case with Liberia. Having said that, the proper rice is something that leaders and politicians are always glad, because instead of them having a relationship with technicians to guard, then they make some problem. The proper rice was a gift. And begin the package and started giving a presentation to the public like, oh, government had done this. the country that gave the gift, you don't expect them to give it all of the time. So the first thing that there is, you should have directed a gift, the proceed, whatever proceed they got from the proper rice, having distributed the gift or sold it, the best thing to do was to transfer it to other productive activity to increase rice production. Either you buy seed rice and distribute it, or you buy tools or equipment for other farmers, or deposit into a commercial bank to give it to farmers. And that itself will increase productivity. Over the period, then you can have excess rice in the economy. Instead, that was a just one-time gift. Unless you go and negotiate again for a second time. And based on your relationship with the country, the people, you got additional one to become a proper rice. So I think that's why decision-making is good for people to do research and do more assessment and see what a feasible way of making public pronouncement. It should be backed by data, informed decision. And you still have the opportunity. They still have the opportunity. Because the Japanese, the Chinese rice, all of these things are still available. All you need to do is to have a program that build, more like import substitution program and say, look, you know what? We import this quantity of rice with this subsidy or support. The proceeds from there should be given to farmers to produce this quantity of rice. At least in 4 or 5 years, we can reduce import quota by this %. And that can help. But we haven't done that. And interestingly, just a year or two ago, we received $30 million from the same partners to say COVID response. And we went to go buy rice, imported rice. We didn't make allowance to say, look, can we take 15 million out of 30 million to say we gave the farmers to go to other crops that are food crops that are very useful to the country, that it can be a substitute. Maybe people start planting more cassava, people start planting more arrows and plantains to create a substitute for rice. None of these decisions were made. Instead, we went and bought the rice and give it to the people and distributed it. Up to now, some families did not receive it. It's not sustainable enough. So instead of saying proper, what is more proper here is to look at other alternatives that help the poor people to sustain their life and also have extra income. So we have to change that. Thank you.
Gentlemen, time is fast spent. Let's get our closing. But William, I'm going to allow you to chime in on the proper rice, and I'm going to feed you with some information here. When the government was launching this so-called proper rice, during the ceremony, the president was there. What's his name? Wisin Tape was there. Nathaniel Mage was there. They gave us the impression during that live event that the proper rice was brought in by a Liberian businessman. But then, after they said it was a Liberian businessman, the commerce minister said, but this rice, no one can buy. I think he said more than 10 bags. He said that right there. But then right there, Nathaniel Mage asked for, I think, about 10,000 bags. And the president even asked for that. So, but I thought you said that the rice here for a Liberian businessman. The next thing we saw, the Inspector General of Commerce was in the street selling the rice for the so-called Liberian businessman who brought the proper rice. You see how it's hard to hide this kind of deceit. So let's say their explanation was right. It was the proper right and were owned by God. Why couldn't they have used the proceed? The fact is the rice was given to Liberia as a gift, as Depu said. If you decided now to say, well, we'll make it proper rice and sell it at an affordable price, this is free rice that we're giving you. So whatever revenue or money you raised was free money. Could you not have gone back to that person that gave you the rice? Well, you gave us free rice first. Now we want to buy and sustain it. Could they not have done that?
Thank you, Anthony. The rice stuff, I know a bit about it, but not enough. I think I would like to please, if you don't mind, I would like to pass it on to Depu or Alex to respond.
Then give your closing times as fast spent.
But I would wait to get my closing after Depu finish.
Depu, the man is getting you in trouble.
But I said the rice, if this rice had been locally produced, from all indication, William, by now, the guy who produced will have had the capacity to produce more. But this was not produced locally. It was a gift. So the reality is that once you make a very good decision to say, distribute it at a low cost so that you can have sustainability and make sure that you maybe reallocate the proceeds for other activity, you will just continue with it on the rice production pattern and say, you know what, we can go and give the proceeds to local farmers, or we give it to another importers and say, you are now going to be doing this and help the country to sustain it. But I didn't see it. The approach was completely different. And in fact, let me say this to you: there's a policy project that was done by Japanese as well. They gave they gave you money, you give you the rights, you sell it at a very low cost, and the money you reinvest it. It's a development aid, but they make it clearly an economic development model that you sell it at a low cost. They do the same thing with petroleum. They give you the petroleum at a low cost, and you sell it and reinvest it in the economy. So you can't consider it to be like you having this, and now that you call it pro-poll, you just needed to have followed the pattern of sustainability of the pro-poll, which I think that was a missing link.
And so let's get your closing now, William. 30 seconds.
Thank you very much, Anthony. I will close real quick. Leadership, good governance, good character. You cannot force those things when you have bad leadership. Okay, bad leadership. You cannot force bad leadership onto international investors, international donors, or thinking that the donors will yield to that. I'm sorry. That is just not going to happen. Let me give you an example in terms of our issue in Liberia is that this bad governance is causing us a lot. And I was speaking to someone and I just told him this. In the U.S., the military defense budget is $782 billion. In Liberia, our budget is $787 million, which is 1/10 of the U.S. budget. A fighter jet, the F-35, costs about $78 million. So when the U.S. orders 10 of those, they've already in our budget. That's just to give you an idea of the enormous amount of capital that is out there. But people are not going to give that to bad leadership. They're not going to help bad leadership. In closing, I can say this. You cannot run your government on economic theories. Okay? You cannot run it on economic theories. And so we are in trouble in Liberia. And I have to agree and yield to what Mr. Alex Coffey said. Our biggest issue is bad governance and bad leadership. I'm not sure if it's President Weah. I don't know. But from what I see, is that this bad leadership and bad governance is causing us a lot. Thank you.
Bad leadership, bad governance. Mr. Coffey, your closing.
I think William said it. So we will continue to have a conversation. Like somebody said, we Liberians, we're just good at talking and talking and talking. Mm-hmm. But we have to talk because in every country, the people are talking. And this kind of talking put together, sometimes they invoke changes. Sometimes they broaden the minds of people. So I think they got a saying that evil triumphs when good people keep quiet. So we got to continue talking. We're just not criticizing, but we're giving ideas. We are debating the issues. We are giving solutions. We're recommending solutions, and hopefully, this is what a good citizen can do, and continue to talk, to invoke when election time comes. We'll do our part to continue talking so that people get to hear us. And people get to put into action. Sometimes some of the things we talk, the government people hear it, and they try to put into place some corrective measures. So we can continue talking. Everybody else is talking. Every country people are talking. So you continue to talk. Even if things are going on well, we'll talk for things to go on better. As things are going on bad, we'll talk. So that's our duty as patriotic citizens.
Double?
Yes, thank you. I think since we've been discussing about state-owned enterprises, my parting comment will be that the government need to work on how best it can have a performance quota for these executive or managing directors of the state-owned enterprises. And going forward, the subsidy that government given should be reduced or should be tied. That government should provide subsidy for investment activity for these state-owned enterprises to improve the service delivery. And from there, that subsidy can be paid back in the end. And the best solution to it is to reduce or cut off whatever subsidy that is coming from government budget to these entities. They are the one that's supposed to finance or provide support to government funding, but not the other way around. And I would want to encourage those in decision-making positions, especially so entities that are very much important to the growth, like those who are responsible for energy, those who are responsible for gas, including energy. They need to be very serious and have this sector discussion among themselves on how they can leverage capital or leverage resources to complement each other in service delivery. That would be one of the best ways in making decisions. Maybe in terms of infrastructure, they can do co-location funding. They can do that and say, we are water and sewer, want to carry a water pipe, water and sewer, and the LEC, the telecom guys, other than take care of the location and do the infrastructure together and co-arrange and support the budget to provide our service to any location. That itself is another way of cutting down their costs and will help them to develop the country. So, but thank you so much for your time today, and I know we'll continue this next time.
Thank you. Larry?
Yeah, thanks, Anthony. Thanks to my fellow panelists. We discussed state-owned enterprises. We also discussed the issue with rice in Liberia. And throughout this discussion, one thing seems to be the same. State-owned enterprises are completely inefficient because if the person who's running the enterprise were to do a poor job, they still get to keep their job. That is the key difference between a public entity and a private entity. On a private side, if you do a poor job, if it's on a corporation where the issue stock, the board will kick you out. The people will force you and will run you out of town. Whereas with the state-owned enterprises, you can come in there, you can be completely clueless in terms of what needs to be done. Do a poor job, and you can still get to keep your job, provided you have connections within the government. It hasn't worked in any country where they have state-owned enterprises. They have never succeeded. As a result, a lot of countries have moved away from using that strategy. We've seen what's going on at the airport. The airport hasn't done a whole lot for over a decade. Nothing good has really happened at the airport. We've seen what's happening with the electricity. So, and one of the key purpose of this, having these broadcasts, is to really educate the people. It's not, Liberia is really poor by design. People go out of their way to make sure certain people stay in power, just to make sure that people are not informed and educated as a way to kind of keep them poor. So by having programs like these, we hope, hopefully people will learn and say, oh, wait a second, why is this happening? Is there something we can do to empower ourselves and to change? And the way you empower yourself and bring about change is at the ballot box. Next time you go and vote for that legislator, you think about it. What did this man do during his time as a legislator, as a senator, as a representative that brought change to my community? If he hasn't done anything, boot him out. Plain and simple. So Focus on Liberia, I really appreciate Anthony and Dennis Jah for the work you guys have been doing. And it's always a pleasure sitting here and working with William, Depu, and Alex on a weekly basis to kind of share knowledge and information with you guys. And thanks for the comments. We pay attention to the comments and we try to respond and answer to the comments as best as possible. So Anthony, thanks again for the opportunity to be here.
Gentlemen, I can't say thank you enough for coming and answering the questions, providing solutions, making recommendations as well, and more so trying to explain the problems that we have and why we are having those problems. I'm sure our listening audience learned a lot today when it comes to state-owned enterprises. Somebody who actually may not have known what is state-owned enterprises might have gotten to know today because of your contribution that you make here. We want to say thank you, and thanks to our many listeners for always coming here, Focus on Liberia, to not only listen but to also share our show. We are here because of you. I close with this. They say education is power, but I say information is power. There's a difference there. Many don't know that. If you know something, and you know it to be what it actually is, you will know what to do the next time. The key problem that Liberia has is the issue of leadership. Leadership is not only the president. All our leaders, the state-owned enterprises are headed by managing directors. I don't think the president will stop them from providing the necessary growth because it will make the president to look good. But they are not doing it. They are only relying on providing salaries for the people that work for them. That is not sustainable. That is why we are where we are, and we cannot continue with that. I agree that you all share the issue of leadership is key. If that managing director is not up to the task, he needs to be changed so that he can understand that there are consequences when he is not delivering the goods to improve or provide reliable services, something for which that particular managing director was appointed in the first place. Until we all come to that conclusion and understanding, we will remain where we are. That is information. That is the real power. My name is Anthony Sier, and this will close our program today, Focus on Liberia. Thank you for watching. And folks, we will close with our song, We Are All Liberians. Whether you disagree with all we say here, you are still a Liberian. Alex Coffey, you are still Larry, William, and Depu, you are. Even if they don't believe all that you said, some people say we are against the government. Why would we be against the government when we are the government? We want a better government. This is why we're talking. I have to go. I don't want to preach a sermon here. Bye-bye, guys.
Thank you.
We are Liberians.